We were on the road, bikes, granola bars, and plenty of water and coffee. Gotta have the coffee. At about 5:30 in the morning. In 2 separate vehicles, I followed my dad to the trailhead in Tunnel Hill, where he then hopped in my car, and we made the drive from there to El Dorado, the northernmost trailhead of the Tunnel Hill State Trail. From there, we unloaded our bikes, we put anything that we thought we would need on the bikes, and off we pedaled. This was the day that had been talked about for over 20 years. Yeah, really. You know how those things go. Hey, someday what if we, or wouldn't it be cool to go in? If there's a lesson in this video, it's get out and do that thing that you're always talking about. So anyway, off we went to the newest leg of this trail, the Harrisburg to El Dorado portion. The section was completely different than any other part of the Tunnel Hill Trail, in that it's paved and runs right through the town. It was not at all what I expected the ride to start off like, since the parts of the trail that I'd seen before were all gravel roads through the woods. It was an awesome change. It felt like having your own little private bike road where you could just look into all the craziness of daily life while just easing along with not much else to worry about than riding your bike and talking. I know, this is what bike paths look like, but hey, small town guy here, so I don't get to ride actual bike paths too often. After following this very easy to spot and clearly marked path, we eventually got away from the sound of traffic and into some more rural riding. A few bridges, fields, and creeks later, we were in more of what I've always known of this trail. Flat, straight gravel roads that just stretch on and on and on through the woods. Every 10 or so miles, there's a small town you pop out into, and all the miles are filled with conversation because unless you're going for a PB, no one's panting, no one's calves are on fire. It's just an easygoing ride with some cool views here and there and old towns peppered throughout. The first time that I rode this trail, I was probably 6 or 7 years old. I rode it on a Cub Scouts outing with my dad. He was the scout leader of the Cub Scout group that I was in. We did something similar to what we were doing today, actually. Vehicles brought all of us kids and our bikes to the Tunnel Hill stop. We headed 0.2 miles to the awesome tunnel, and then the rest of the way down to Vienna, where everyone's parents were waiting with snacks and sandwiches, and if I remember right, probably some barbecue and stuff, ready to fuel us up after our grueling 9 or so miles of slight downhill grade. Hey, as a kid on Walmart BMX bikes, those Cub Scout days felt like we were tackling an entire state. Since then, my dad and I have been back and ridden the Vienna to Karnak Wetlands Center section of the trail quite a few times, as well as done the Vienna to Tunnel Hill section, who knows how many times over the years. I've taken people there that I'm trying to get into biking. It's just a good beginner section of trail. I've taken my 6-year-old daughter there to ride as soon as we got her first bike, and my 3-year-old will probably have her inaugural Tunnel Hill ride pretty soon. With all those trips though, we'd never been on the upper half or the upper 30-ish miles of this trail. Around here, when people talk about the trail, it's always the Vienna to Tunnel Hill section that they talk about. It's still the best section in my opinion. There's a cool bridge every mile or so, and the tunnel itself, which is just something you have to see in person. It really messes with your brain on your first trip through it. It looks like it should take you just a few seconds, 5 or 10 seconds to get through it, but as you get into it and it starts to really get dark, it looks like it stretches further and further and further out in front of you. It's weird to see broad daylight and not be able to see your hand in front of your face. It somehow gives you this vertigo in a way, but in a flat plane, it's just a weird, cool sensation. You'd have to see it to understand it. This not knowing what the rest of the trail was, however, is why we had talked about this ride for years. Other than the El Dorado paved bike path part, it turned out to be exactly what we had expected. That is very similar to the rest of the trail, minus the frequent cooler parts like bridges and a tunnel. We did come across some old pylons that we later found out were where train tracks had been intersecting before over the trail, and it was known as the Parker site, like the last name Parker. And it was a big trade spot. According to the signs posted at each stop, which give you a little bit of history, the place is described as follows. Hotels, dining rooms, and barbershops thrived on business from salesmen traveling on trains. With the decline of rail traffic, Parker disappeared. Aside from being able to have great conversation with whoever is riding along with you, it's the history like this that makes this trail absolutely worth a trip. Every stop in a small town and just about every other mile of the trail feels like there's just some history there. I describe it as a leisurely ride because if you ride this and don't stop at all the small towns to have a look around, maybe hop off the bike path and just pedal around those small towns a little bit before you re-enter the gravel path and get back into the forest, you're kind of missing the point of this trail. In the end, we conquered the 33-ish miles back to Tunnel Hill. We loaded our bikes back into my dad's truck, headed back to my car again. I loaded my bike back onto my car, and then we both hit the road back home. I could have drove to Tunnel Hill and hit this trail as an out and back, 60 miles or whatever, on my own, but I never did. I held off on this so that it could kind of be a father-son thing. The first time I ever rode this trail was in Scouts with my dad, again, the scout leader at the time. I'm not trying to make this a sappy video, I'm just saying, yet again, whatever that thing is that you're always talking about doing, just go do it.